only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
You find your way to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us. Our website, wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. Both of those, wealth of information there. Wallbuilderslive.com is a great resource for archived programs as well. Our Good News Fridays, our Foundations of Freedom Thursdays, previous interviews. So check that out. You can get several months of programs. And then on wallbuilders.com, you can get all kinds of articles about just about every issue out there. Not quite every issue out there. David, I feel like after however many years we've been in the show that we've touched on everything. But today's topic's one we haven't actually talked about that much, foreign aid and how much money we spend as a nation giving to other countries, sometimes friends, sometimes foe.
Well, it's about $31 billion this year. So we're looking at a lot of money that we're putting out for other nations, and this is something that people think of as a normal part of federal government. But just for curiosity, just for grins, any clue when foreign aid began? And by the way, let me point out that in this $31 billion of foreign aid, who do you think it would go to? Why do you think we would give foreign aid? If you were looking for a purpose for the federal government, why the federal government should give money to other nations, why would that be?
Sounds cliche, but certainly only if it's in our national interest. If there's some way that by putting money into investing in another nation in some way that's going to protect us. I can think of a few scenarios for that, but that's kind of the general. What would
the scenarios be?
One would be if they're an ally of ours in a delicate situation. Certainly Israel's a nation I would think of that we would want to give aid to. They're the only nation like us in terms of democracy and being standing for the same thing. So that would be a good example. Maybe a nation that's fighting alongside us in the war against radical Islam and figuring out a way to help them do that.
All right. Those who would you not expect us to give to?
Certainly not a nation that's fighting against us, or standing for things opposite of us, and while also fighting against us. I mean, I know, obviously in international affairs you're going to have strange bedfellows sometimes. And
who would you say? Which nations would you say are probably nations we should not be giving foreign aid to?
Oh, I would think any nation that's supporting terrorism or harboring Islamic, terrorists. I mean, that seems to be the key, the main battle right now today.
What, Pakistan? Since there's so many terrorists in Pakistan that come out into Afghanistan and attack Americans?
Yeah, that's a weird one because, I've always thought of why do we help Pakistan? Is it because they're a nuclear power and we're just trying to keep them from going crazy? But yet, you constantly are learning things they're doing that are hurting us. So, yeah, that would seem to be a strange one to give money to.
All right, that's about 1.1 billion to Pakistan. Who else would you think is people? How about Russia? You think of Russia?
Oh, yeah. Why would we give money to Russia?
All right, we give money to Russia. How about North Korea?
You're kidding. We give money? Surely not.
How about Iran?
I would hope not.
We do. We give foreign aid to Iran.
Yeah, I wonder if we give, and I apologize for being so ignorant on this. It just hasn't been one I know much about. Do we give money to people like Saudi Arabia that are we give
so
money. Wealthy? They're so wealthy. We're already giving them hundreds of billions of dollars in oil. Why would we give them cash?
We give money to Saudi Arabia. They're on the list of people we give to.
Wow. Yeah, that's surprising to me. I mean, especially when you think about our own needs here at home.
Well, I would think and I would hope that it would be really surprising to a whole lot of people. I'm not sure there's a country out there we don't give money to.
Yeah.
Now, are we getting our money's worth back? I don't think so. I'm not sure it's helped our relations with Russia any at all, and I'm not sure that Russia was ever in our corner on stuff. Now, Israel's in our corner.
That's probably the best investment.
That's the best investment
actually paid off. I wonder if we, just a sidetrack here on Russia, I wonder if that started whenever they collapsed and Soviet Union collapsed, and were we trying to keep that from becoming a nuclear problem? I don't know. I mean, that one's over my head.
But that was years ago.
Yeah.
Why still do it now?
Yeah.
You know, with Putin, why are we giving Putin money? And they've got all this oil stuff coming out of Russia, and we're giving.
Well, especially with them getting aggressive again, and and the things they're doing right now in the world.
Well, see, what's really interesting is foreign aid really didn't begin as a policy till about 1961.
You're kidding.
No. So how does that grab you? We think this is a huge part of what America is supposed to do. See, the first time ever you have any foreign aid is in 1917. And grab this, it's in World War I, and Belgium is in the middle of the war, and we gave a loan of $387 million to Belgium. That was our first foreign aid, okay? So we've got that. Then in 1919, we, from private donations, raised $200 million, and we gave that for food for European countries that have been devastated by the war. So that's foreign aid, but not money. It's food. So there was a loan, then there was food. Then in 1943, we took and we poured in all sorts of material supply and resources and agriculture and food to all these devastated countries in Germany. Still not giving cash. I mean, you got medical care and sanitation, all these things. And then in 1947, for the first time, we gave money to Greece and Turkey, trying to help rebuild them after the war. So 1947, but it was not until 1961 that Congress passed the Foreign Assistance Act, 1961. So since 61, how many $trillion have we given out? And we're giving them to enemies as well as to friends. And one of those examples, one of those top, out of nearly 200 nations in the world, 31 billion we give out, one of the top recipients for size is Pakistan. And yet Pakistan is one of the most hostile. And so our good friend David French from American Center for Law and Justice has got a great analysis of what's happening with this and some other stuff as well. But the foreign aid stuff, we're so used to it being part of government, we think it's a long-standing thing that goes back to Washington. Not so. This is brand new. It needs to be seriously reformed, but David French has got a great perspective on this.
David will be back with us when we return right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Revisions today often assert that our founding fathers were atheists or agnostics or deists. This charge is not new. In fact, Patrick Henry was even called a deist in his lifetime. Clearly, no one could question his patriotism, but Henry was hurt that they would question his Christianity. Against the charge that he was a deist, Patrick Henry thundered, "Deism, with me, is but another name for vice and depravity. I hear it is said by the deists that I am one of their number, and indeed that some good people think I am no Christian. This thought gives me much more pain than being called a traitor. Being a Christian is a character which I prize far above all this world has or can boast." Patrick Henry was quick to refute the charge of deism and to declare his open belief as a Christian.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. It's been way too long, but it's a new year, and we're glad to have him back. David French is with us. David, always good to have you, brother.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So how are things at the American Center for Law and Justice?
Going well. Very, very busy to start the new year. Just filed an amicus brief on behalf of 68 members of Congress challenging the president's unlawful immigration action. So that's a good way to kick things off.
I love it. Well, man, we got to. I want to know more about that. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. It's been too long since we had you, so this will be kind of a rapid fire. What does David French think about? And then we'll make it a new game show.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, let's start with this with your article about Pakistan still receiving billions of dollars from the U.S. and the fact that they, the things that they do to a Christian woman for what they call blasphemy, and they've set to put a woman to death for this.
Right. I mean, this story of Asia Bibi, who's facing the death penalty for defending her faith. She was not blaspheming the Prophet Muhammad. She was merely defending her Christian faith. And by the way, even if she was blaspheming the Prophet Muhammad, there should be no death penalty for that or any criminal penalty whatsoever. But here she was defending her faith, and she's sentenced to death. The thing there's so many things wrong with this. I mean, of course, there's the human rights atrocity that execution would represent. But then here's what compounds it all. We give Pakistan every year billions of dollars in aid. And if there is ever a country that has demonstrated that it is unworthy of the term ally to the United States, it is Pakistan. We know, for example, that Pakistani troops have fired on American troops in Afghanistan. We have abundant evidence that the Pakistani intelligence services, known as the ISI, have supported the Taliban in Afghanistan against the United States. Osama bin Laden lived the equivalent of a stone's throw from what would be our West Point for years, completely unbothered by Pakistani authorities. They claim they didn't know. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
So, here's a country that, in addition to its massive human rights problems, has had a series of duplicitous dealings with the United States, and we still provide billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. Now, here's my question. What incentives does Pakistan have to stop that behavior? None, because it can pursue its strategic interests, which it perceives as driving the U.S. out of Afghanistan, at the same time that it receives American money, at the same time that it permits its courts to impose this draconian, horrific version of Sharia law. And we will still pay them money. So we're providing them with no incentive to stop this behavior.
Well, what does the other side say to this? I mean, when the State Department would say what? That because they have nuclear weapons, we have to somehow appease them with billions of dollars? I mean, what's their main argument?
Well, they have a couple of arguments. One is that Pakistani military has fought the Taliban, and that is true to the extent that the Pakistani military engages the Taliban when it feels the Taliban is a threat to its authority in Pakistan. It does not engage the Taliban effectively when talking about the branches of the Taliban that are so effective at launching attacks on U.S. troops and Afghan troops. So they claim that Pakistan's a partner in the war on terror. They claim that the financial aid contributes to security in the region. A lot of the standard arguments are given for this nonstop flow of money that we send to governments of dubious quality. The problem is you begin to create a situation where these governments are dependent upon our dollars, feel entitled to our dollars, and then threaten horrible action if the dollars are turned off. Yet, I would say that it's past time to try to incentivize these governments. We've proven to be very effective at giving away taxpayer dollars and getting nothing in return. It's time to put conditions on taxpayer dollars that are quite simple. American aid is for American allies. An alliance with America is demonstrated by actions and not words. It's a pretty simple principle.
No doubt. Can't see this president pushing for that, but do you see more folks in Washington, D.C. that would push for that, whether it be a new president or a new Congress, whatever?
Well, there are absolutely senators who've been out there on front on dealing with this issue. I know Rand Paul has, and Senator Cruz has, others have, pushing this issue out to say, look, American aid should be for American allies. It's a pretty simple proposition. But it's utterly incompatible with this administration's philosophy, which is to appease, and to keep appeasing. As bad, or I would say worse than what's happening in Pakistan, is the amount of sanctions relief that Iran has received during the course of these nuclear negotiations. Iran has received billions of dollars in sanctions relief and has given us nothing. In fact, it continues to hold an American citizen, Pastor Saeed Abedini, for no other reason but his Christian faith, hold him and abuse him, and yet we give hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in sanctions relief to a country actively pursuing nuclear weapons that's been actively involved in attacking and killing United States troops and attacking and killing United States civilians. So this is all of a piece with the administration's policy. But, we can't blame the Obama administration entirely here. A lot of this aid that's gone to entities like Pakistan or the Palestinian Authority goes back to the Bush administration and sometimes before that.
Got to change, man. Got to change, and it starts with educating folks so they can question their members of Congress about where they stand on it, and hopefully presidential candidates in this next go around. Got to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to hit another article that you recently wrote on the vindication of Christian sexual ethics. Stay with us, folks. David French is our guest today. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Joseph Story is one of the most important names in American jurisprudence. Not only was he placed on the U.S. Supreme Court by President James Madison, but he also founded Harvard Law School and authored numerous legal works on the Constitution. While today's revisionists claim that the goal of the First Amendment was absolute religious pluralism, Justice Joseph Story vehemently disagreed. He declared, "The real object of the First Amendment was not to encourage, much less to advance Mohammedanism or Judaism or infidelity by prostrating Christianity, but was to exclude all rivalry among Christian denominations." According to founder Joseph Story, Christianity, not pluralism, was the goal of the Founding Fathers in the First Amendment, for only a Christian nation is tolerant and thus is truly pluralistic.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us on WallBuilders Live today. Our guest today, David French. We're talking about some of his articles on nationalreview.com, which you can get to nationalreview.com/corner and look up David French there, and we'll have links to these two articles today as well. David, this one, wanted to get you on a month or so ago, and our schedule got so crazy, and yours as well, but you were talking about how the vindication of Christian sexual ethics is coming to the forefront now. I mean, we've seen the liberation of, any kind of sex you want, anywhere you want, and the results of that. Are people paying attention?
More than you might think. What we're really seeing now, in a lot of ways, especially on college campuses, is the collapse of the promises of the sexual revolution. Essentially, what the sexual revolution said was, no rules. It's going to be okay. You're going to have your best life without any restriction on sexual activity. All of that stuff about reserving sex for marriage, that's the patriarchy speaking. That's traditional religion speaking. We want to liberate you. And college campuses adopted that, were early adopters of that philosophy, took it further than anybody, and now the culture on campus is really in a free fall. Huge amounts of discussion and controversy over the prevalence of rape on college campuses. And what we're finding is that a lot of the arguments about forcible rape, for example, a lot of those things are exaggerated, but what's not exaggerated is that the actual experience of people on campus is often saturated in drugs and alcohol, causing depression, causing anxiety, causing a real crisis of conscience on campus. And so in many ways, the sexual revolution ethic is just completely falling apart. And so now is exactly the right time for Christians to step up into that gap and say, there's a better way. It happens to be the way that you denigrated and you mocked 50 years ago, but it is the way where people thrive, where people's dignity is respected, and it's a true alternative to the anything-goes atmosphere on campus that's soaked in drugs and alcohol, that's causing an enormous amount of heartache and real problems in mental health.
You mentioned, the way it's collapsing on college campuses, but in the article you also mentioned, our generation, their mid-40s, and how many folks are struggling with the consequences of those decisions they made in their carefree teens and 20s. So you've got two generations here that are dealing with the baggage of this, sexual society, carefree sex outside of the way God designed it. So you've really got a lot of folks that I would think would be saying there's got to be a better way. Maybe those old-fashioned rules actually do produce a more joyful, happier life with great sex in the confounds of marriage.
Well, what's happening, and this is so what's so pernicious about so much of the sexual revolution, at the same time that the revolutionary promises are collapsing all around them, at the same time that these colleges are being just swamped with controversy over sexual assault, over rape, swamped with problems in mental health and anxiety, etc. They're trying hard to push Christian groups off campus. So here are the groups that have an alternative vision, one that does not involve this, binge drinking, drug taking, sexual culture that's causing such heartache. And college campuses the college administrations don't want to hear from them. At the California State University system, more than 20 campuses have taken action against Christian groups. And this is just one place in the country. Even here in Nashville, Tennessee, I'm right outside of Nashville, belt buckle of the Bible Belt, Vanderbilt University took action against more than a dozen Christian organizations. So the sexual revolution is collapsing morally, but it's still got a lot of political power, and it's exercising that power against Christian speech.
Yeah, so if you want to have a campus organization that's all about doing crazy things that will destroy your life or make your life very painful and with lots of consequences, hey, come on in. We want to help you. We'll give you student fees to do that. But if you're a Christian organization that actually is going to give us some great ways to live with joy and peace and all these wonderful things that Christian life offers, we don't want that.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's absolutely pathetic at some point. This idea that the so-called marketplace of ideas, these people who say they believe in academic freedom, systematically exclude a Christian point of view. And that's not even getting into the challenges that Christian professors face.
Yeah.
But, I do think we're reaching a really critical moment where a lot of Americans, especially Americans in college, are waking up and saying, wait a minute, the story we were told is not right. The philosophy we were sold is bankrupt. And that's leaving a void in people's hearts, it's leaving a void in their lives, and there's an enormous amount of heartache out there. And I brought up folks from my own generation because my own generation, I'm 45 now, and in college in the late 80s, early 90s, that was when the party was in full swing. The party has been in full swing on campus for a very long time. And I have dear friends, dear Christian friends, who jumped into that party with both feet in college and are experiencing consequences even to this day. And it's just terribly sad, And leaving aside the political arguments about it, there's a lot of human trauma and a lot of human despair out there on campuses because of this philosophy. And it's high time that Christians shed any sense of reservation or timidity about sharing the gospel and about sharing a better way, because people are hungry for that better way, because the way they've been trying has been leading to an awful lot of heartache.
Yeah, it's actually a huge opportunity to share, as you said, that better way. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to come in and say, hey, here's a much more joyful, much better results. I mean, people are always talking about how do you make your life better, how do you improve. I mean, here it is. Here's a rule book that actually works and that gets great results. God's way is not only right, it's definitely best and gets the best results. David French, great stuff as always. You mentioned earlier the case that you're doing for the congressman with regard to Obama's unconstitutional acts. Would love to get you back very soon on that and get some details.
Oh, anytime. Love to chat.
That's David French. We'll be back in a moment with David Barton. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty, and Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at WallBuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks to David French and all the good work American Center for Law and Justice does. David, back here with David Barton now. David, always good to have. I can't believe we haven't had David French in so long, man. We used to be like the David French show once a week.
Yeah, that's right. It's good to have him back, and I love what he said. He said, governments dependent upon our dollars soon feel entitled to our dollars, and they then threaten us with terrible things if we turn the dollars off. And that's the problem. And by the way, that's the problem with government dependency in so many areas, whether it be welfare. Ben Franklin said, if you start doing that, people will feel like it's an entitlement, and then they'll be ungrateful for what they do receive.
Yeah.
But the other thing David said was that the current administration, its foreign policy is appeasement. And so that got me curious. And I started looking for quick quotes on appeasement. I thought these were great. Here's Harry Truman, 1950. Appeasement leads only to further aggression and ultimately to war. Here's a quote he had from 1948. Harry Truman says, the world has learned that it is weakness and appeasement invites aggression. A firm position on reasonable ground offers the best hope of peace. So appeasement doesn't do peace, but we keep appeasing Iran and North Korea. And here's one from FDR in 1940. He said, the people of the United States, the people of all the Americas, reject the doctrine of appeasement. They recognize it for what it is, a major weapon of the aggressor nations. Man, we're not learning our lesson with this administration, but what we're doing and giving money to countries like Pakistan who are so bad in so many areas and then trying to appease them is just unbelievable.
Those quotes are so good. There's so much for us to learn from the past to help us deal with these things in the present and certainly do a better job as we go into the future. Thanks for listening today, folks. Special thanks to David French for joining us as well. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided forever.